Legendary and Warner Brothers are teaming up once again to bring us another installment in the Pacific Rim franchise. This time, it's a prequel series that's set to become one of Max's biggest budget exclusives. According to Variety, Eric Heiserer, head of the production company Chronology, will be at the helm of the show. Heiserer, known for his work on films like Arrival and Bird Box, as well as the series Shadow and Bone, has struck a deal with Legendary to oversee a range of major franchise projects. For now, he'll be focusing on Pacific Rim. Legendary television president Jason Clodfelter is thrilled about the collaboration, praising Heiserer as a versatile, talented creator with a track record of critically and commercially successful projects. The development of the Pacific Rim prequel is already underway, with screenplay drafts approved. The plot is set to unfold a decade before the events of the first film, exploring the origins of the portals at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. We'll delve into the entire backstory and the beginnings of the kaiju-human conflict, revealing why humanity built giant mechs called Jaegers to battle these monsters. The series will also cover the initial encounters with kaiju and the early methods for combating them. As a prequel, it might also address a crucial question in the franchise: the origin of the interdimensional rift. It's worth mentioning that when Guillermo del Toro first embarked on the Pacific Rim, he had a vision for an entire trilogy, with release dates already lined up for the sequels. According to del Toro's original plan, he intended to reveal the backstory of the kaiju invasion in the second film, with the third installment set to depict the final battle in the Antiverse, the kaiju's dimension. However, as we all know, the studios politely stepped away from del Toro's ambitious plans and handed the sequel over to Steven DeKnight. The second movie, subtitled Uprising, failed to replicate the success of the original and was visually quite different, a shift that didn't sit well with the audience. Warner Brothers seemed to be aiming for a mix of Transformers and Fast and Furious with dynamic battles and a flashy color palette. But the showrunners of the prequel need to address these missteps and bring the franchise back to its roots. It needs to be unique yet recognizable, preserving the distinctive charm of the original. If they go for a style similar to Uprising, it could be another flop, given that the sequel's appeal leaned heavily on what the original had already established. Acknowledging the mistakes in the stylistic approach and reverting to the original visual concept is crucial if they want the prequel to captivate audiences. The creators are already promising to focus on realism, returning to the approach of the first film. This is particularly important for the action sequences. Audiences need to once again believe in the reality of these colossal battles between giant creatures, so the dynamics have to be handled carefully. The first Pacific Rim has always felt underrated. Sure, critics may have had issues with the plot and acting, but the film has its merits. The attention to detail and the precision with which del Toro brought his vision to life were remarkable. You could argue that in this movie, form takes precedence over content, but that only becomes a problem if the form fails to captivate the viewer from start to finish. Even after a decade, Pacific Rim still impresses. With Uprising, not only was del Toro's visionary touch lost, but the entire atmosphere of the original was compromised. Its unique design and world logic were thrown out the window. That's why the prequel needs to focus on what made the original special, ensuring it stands out while remaining true to its roots. But just imagine how Eric Heiserer's experience with Arrival could help set the tone for the next Pacific Rim. That same sci-fi style with visually bold scenes and a strong storyline could really rejuvenate the franchise. Legendary and Warner Brothers have to keep experimenting and trying out new things. Only then will the show get the streaming numbers it needs, which might even open the door to a third full-length film. Remember, the ending of Uprising clearly hinted at this, leaving audiences hanging with a cliffhanger. If Pacific Rim 3 does make it to theaters, it's set to depict the final showdown between humanity and the kaiju, but this time with the Jaegers venturing into the Antiverse themselves to put an end to the conflict once and for all. Conclusion of Uprising laid the foundation for the Pan-Pacific Defense Corps to directly confront the precursors in a bid to avert a looming catastrophe. We might also learn that the kaiju have their own language, hierarchy, and even their own kings who exert psychological control over the others. Steven DeKnight, who helmed Pacific Rim 2, recently laid out his ambitious vision for a third film and the franchise's expansion into a full-blown cinematic universe. In an interview, DeKnight hinted at sweeping plans for the movie series, but kept the specifics under tight wraps. He made it clear that the creative team already has a roadmap for future projects. During the production of the second movie, DeKnight and his team were always tossing around ideas for a third installment, leading to several script drafts that have already established a basic framework for the next next film. Director drew an intriguing comparison, likening the Pacific Rim to the Star Wars saga. He stressed that future projects wouldn't necessarily be confined to direct sequels. Instead, there could be spin-offs that dive into new storylines and characters, fleshing out the universe with even more narratives. This approach mirrors the strategy of other successful cinematic universes, signaling a shift for the Pacific Rim franchise toward a more varied and expansive storytelling model. By comparing it to Star Wars, D. Knight envisions a universe rich in lore and diversity, potentially bringing audiences a mix of genres and styles within a unified narrative framework. It's a bold move, suggesting that the franchise could evolve beyond its original concept, delivering a multitude of stories that appeal to a broader audience. In other words, Pacific Rim has enormous potential, and there's no shortage of storylines to explore. The idea of a prequel is also pretty intriguing. If the numbers satisfy the studios, they'll definitely continue expanding the Pacific Rim universe. Stay tuned.